Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of Nervous Breakdowns, a podcast where your questions about relationships, dating, personality, and mental health are answered by Gino Tramontelli. Gino's a nationally certified counselor with master's degrees in clinical and counseling psychology. And now, here's the man himself, Gino Tramontelli.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Episode 12 of Nervous Breakdowns with G. And today we're going to be talking about jealousy and Schadenfreude. For those of you who don't know, and Schadenfreude is a very popular term on the internet. It's a German word, and I'm going to mess this up, but the direct translation is something like failure joy or something. But the term Schadenfreude is essentially a term used to describe when you feel joy at the failures of others. And it's considered to be the counterpart to jealousy. If jealousy is when I feel pain or anger or sadness at the success of others, then the counterpart would be Schadenfreude, which is the joy at other people's failures. And listen, before I get started, I want everybody to get off their high horses right now. Everybody feels jealousy, and everybody feels joy at the pain of others. All right. If that wasn't true, America's Funniest Home Videos would not exist. The truth of the matter is that almost all reality TV, from Cops to the Kardashians to you name it, the Real Housewives of whatever bumblefuck, these are all things that we watch that satisfy our need to feel jealous about people that are more successful than us, and also to feel glee when those people fall on their faces. So, the reason I wanted to tackle this one, well, let me back up a second. So with this podcast, what I've tried to do is to try to engage my friends and those of you that I'm connected with on social media. I've tried to engage you in discussion. So, for example, the week before I'm going to have a particular podcast, I'll write on my Facebook page or my Twitter, hey, this is my topic for my next podcast, and let's have a discussion about it. Let's all engage. And for the most part, I get a lot of responses. So when I did one on marriage, I had a lot of people telling me their tips and tricks and their perceptions of marriage. I did one on anxiety, and a lot of people wanted to know, they had questions. I put up this one, and I got zilch responses. No, let me take that back. I definitely got one response, but it was crickets. And I came to the conclusion that I either have the most evolved group of friends, or I have some friends who are not willing to admit that they sometimes have a feeling that is pretty nasty. All right. Now, look, everybody has jealousy, which is why I wanted to tackle this topic today. I'd have to say that in the past 6 to 12 months, let's just say a year to be safe, I have been spending a lot of time looking at myself and looking at success, how to be successful, what do successful people do? How can I be more busy? Because truthfully, I'm in the beginning stages of middle age. I have 2 children at home. I have to stop fooling around. I have to get my shit together. And if I'm going to accomplish something, now's the time I need to do it. And to that end, I've been looking at, like I said, just looking at successful people and trying my best to figure out what they're doing. What are the things that they're doing right? And one of the things that I've noticed is that successful people tend not to concern themselves that much with what other people are doing. They tend to always have lots of projects going on, and they tend to, if they do look at other people, they're looking at them as a model, or they're looking at them to see what they're doing right. And so part of me was struggling with jealousy, and this is one of the things that kept me stuck, because I think that jealousy is an anchor. I think that when we sit and examine other people's successes and it makes us feel bad in some insidious way, in some kind of like under the surface way, that jealousy is like a lead weight, and it keeps us from being able to be successful ourselves. So in this show, I wanted to give a glimpse into my own process, into the process of self-exploration, into the way I came to grips with my own feelings of jealousy and the solution that I think I found for me anyway. And but I suspect that at least an element of this might be useful to most people that are listening. So if you guys have been listening to my podcast, you'll know that I tend to try to examine the function of certain behaviors, or try to examine how this might have been helpful to us at some point in the past. For example, in my anxiety show, I talked a little bit about, or rather a lot, it was the bulk of my show, but I talked about anxiety and how it at one point was useful to us. At one point, the fight or flight response basically was the appropriate response to most of the things that humans faced, especially when you consider primitive people. There weren't many problems a primitive man encountered that you couldn't fix by either smashing it or running away from it. And when we are able to look at it in that light, we can sometimes get fairly close to the explanation of why we have certain things. And this is paired with my belief that if we have a feeling, or we have a trait or a quality or a behavior that we do consistently, there's something about that is functional for us, that we must get something out of it. So the first thing I did was to look at jealousy in these terms. And I thought to myself, is there some way that jealousy may have been helpful to us? Once again, guys, we're sitting here, you guys are listening to me over the internet, on a mobile device, most likely. We have a world that we live in this day and age that is far removed from the world that our ancestors lived in for the vast majority of human experiences. We're talking about the vast majority of human experiences, or human history. There was no such thing as wireless communication. There was no such thing as wired communication. You might, for some of it, be able to get a letter to somebody that's far away, but it would take months and months. We're talking about a civilization that essentially that most people lived in communities of 150 or 200 or a couple of thousand people, not millions, and your community was what it was. Strangers were a rarity. Somebody strange came into town, everybody knew it. Okay? So when you think about that, right, jealousy kind of makes sense. And it kind of makes sense because there was a zero-sum game at play. Now, for those of you who don't know what a zero-sum game is, I'll explain it. It's a game theory. It's a mathematical expression of a type of game where when you add up all the winners and all the losers, the sum is zero. So a football game, for example, if you have a winner, there must necessarily be a loser, and therefore +1 and -1 is 0. It's a zero-sum game. Even when there's a tie, that goes neither in the win or the loss column. So there's no winner. It's zero-sum. Okay. Now, why I'm describing this is because we have to apply it to other things. So we apply it to, for example, humanity, where somebody's success, if somebody else is a winner, then I must necessarily be a loser. Here's an example. Let's say my sibling and I, my brother and I, are being left some land from our parents. Our parents die and they leave us land in their will. And there's two plots of land, and one is clearly better and one is clearly inferior. If my sibling gets the better piece of land, then he wins, and I must necessarily lose. I get the lesser piece. If we are tribal people and we're out hunting an animal, and we all take something down together, and the first person there takes the choicest piece of meat, then necessarily I will have an inferior piece of meat. So there must be a winner and a loser. And I think that for most of human history, when you were dealing with small communities and infinite resources, there was this at play. In other words, I had to feel jealousy for somebody. I had to feel bad when somebody else succeeds because I necessarily must fail for them to succeed. And I think that explains some piece of it. But even as I'm saying it now, it doesn't feel like it covers the whole problem, the whole question of jealousy. Why, and especially now when that's not at play anymore. In other words, somebody else could be successful. just because Justin Bieber has $1 billion doesn't mean I can't have $1 billion. You know, he can be successful and I can be successful too. But I still find myself feeling jealousy, especially when I feel like people don't deserve their success. And as soon as I got to that point in my reason, I realized that was what it was. It was the feeling as though people can be successful without deserving it, and I, in some way, am less successful, and I do deserve it. And it brings me to the next topic that I'm going to talk about, which is, sometimes in our lives we encounter people that give us information, and to that person the information was maybe meaningless or secondary, or it's not that profound, but sometimes they give you a piece of information that really hits you hard. And this is one of those pieces that I got from a very good friend of mine about 10 years ago. 10 years, maybe a little longer, 10, 12, 13 years ago. So I was in graduate school getting my first master's degree in clinical psychology with a really smart guy named Bill Breen. He's now a PhD level psychologist, so Dr. William Breen, super bright guy. And we were having a discussion. We're driving along in Baltimore where we were in graduate school. Now, for those of you who are from Baltimore, you'll know this to be true. And I haven't been there many years, so if it's different, I apologize. But when I was there from the period from like 1996 to 2003, Baltimore was a city that was heavily divided among racial and socioeconomic lines. Now, what I mean by that is there was, let's say, 75% of Baltimore was poor and usually minority, black, right? And there were lots of parts of Baltimore that were really rough, you know, just like poor, a lot of crime, a lot of IV heroin use, just a really bad parts of the city. And then the other smaller percentage, let's say 25, 30%, was affluent and typically white. And there was a lot of, there's a big college community there. So in Baltimore, you have, for example, Johns Hopkins University, Loyola College. Not far from there is Towson University and some, I think there was UMBC, lots of colleges. And so you had a lot of people who were college graduates that settled in Baltimore and were more affluent. The other tricky thing about Baltimore is that there were sometimes parts where you were, the bad parts and the nice parts were sometimes right next to each other. So if you were walking down a street, you might find yourself in a rough neighborhood just by crossing one street. You go from like a decent neighborhood to a really bad one in a block. So as such, there were lots of times where we would see panhandlers, homeless people. And I made a remark to my buddy Bill. I said, again, I didn't really have a great worldview. I was pretty sheltered at the time. And I said, it's interesting to me that this guy is out here all the time. He's a guy who's out here begging for money. He looks poor, clearly. But he's here in the snow and the rain, the 90-degree weather, you name it, he's always there. And I wonder why. I mean, if he's putting in a lot of work, why not just go get a job? You know, it seems like if it's a laziness issue, he's not that lazy. He's hustling. He's out there every day. And he introduced me to the concept of the fundamental attribution error. Now, this gets a little heady, so bear with me for a second. But the fundamental attribution error is a concept in psychology, in social psychology specifically, where we attribute rationale, we attribute motivation to people based on several factors. So let me give an example. Let's say that we were considering someone who was convicted of a crime. We're wondering to ourselves, what was the motivation or what were the factors that led to this criminal behavior? So what kind of a crime could it be? Let's say speeding. Let's say the person was speeding with their car. And as we do this on the road all the time when we look at other people, we look at their behaviors and we tell ourselves, wow, that person's really driving recklessly. It must be because they're crazy. It must be because they're a jerk. Or it must be because they don't care about anybody else on the road. And we look at their behavior and we think that it's explainable by the qualities of that person, right? The internal qualities of the person are the way we explain other people's bad behaviors. Now, when we look at our own bad behavior, we tend to attribute external qualities. For example, if I'm speeding, it's because I didn't know of the speed limit, or it's because I have a rush. I'm in a rush for a special reason that it makes it okay for me to do this, or it's an emergency. That would be the special reason, but it's an emergency. I have a family member in the hospital, or I'm late for a big thing. In other words, it's not because we are bad inside. It's not because of some bad quality we have, but we have some quality outside us that's extenuating. It explains away our behavior. So just to recap, when we look at other people's bad behaviors, we think it's some bad quality, some badness they have inside them. And when we look at our bad behavior, we think we explain it by something outside us. So when I mess up on an exam, it's because the teacher didn't teach us properly, or the questions didn't make any sense, or I didn't sleep well last night because my roommate was bothering me. Those types of things, not because I necessarily am not smart or I didn't study hard enough, etc. Now, the opposite is also true. When we look at other people's successes, we tend not to think that they're successful because of internal qualities. We attribute their success to external qualities. For example, we look at somebody like the Kardashians and we say, well, they're famous because her father was famous, or they're famous because society is screwed up and makes them famous, or they're famous because of her sex tape. Whatever the case may be, it's something other than a positive quality she might have. These Kardashian girls, they might, other than they have, great marketing, or they really know how to work a business, or it can't be a good thing. It has to be something that makes them undeserving. Opposed to us, when we look at ourselves, we look at the internal qualities we have. We look at, for example, if I have successes because I really worked hard, or because I'm really bright, or I know how to work people, and I know how to schmooze, and I use my social skills. I get the credit for my success, whereas we can never give people credit for their success. And I think that this is the core of the jealousy issue. This is the very meat of the matter, is that when we look at people and we're jealous of them, I think more so that we feel like we can't be successful. We feel like they're successful and they don't deserve it, and we're not successful and we do deserve it. And the reason we think that is because we have the benefit of knowing our intentions. We have the benefit of knowing our own effort and how much work we put into things, and we don't see that from other people. All we see is the result. So we see somebody who we talk to once in a while, and they seem to be nice people, but whatever, we don't see them. They may not talk about necessarily the moves they're making at work, or the things that they're studying, and all of a sudden they have a promotion at their job, and we're like, well, what the shit? I work hard, I'm not getting promoted. This is bull. So that I think for me, that's it, is that when I see other people that are successful, particularly, knowing that I went to grad school twice and I have a couple of degrees and I know how much work that took, and I feel like I haven't had the kind of success, at least financially, that I was hoping for. And then I see other people who did less schooling than me and are doing better than me money-wise. To me, that's like, wow, that makes me jealous. Of course, I want to be able to be successful financially too. And I have to always remind myself that just because I worked hard in an academic way doesn't mean that those people didn't work hard in some other way. Maybe somebody really became good at their craft. If they are a mechanic, maybe they spent lots of time figuring out how to work under their car, and they spent a lot of time being an apprentice for somebody else, and maybe they're really good at business, so they're a mechanic, but they're really good at getting people to come in their shop, and so they're making a lot of money on the strength of that. But once again, I have to remind myself that when people have success, I can't assume that they don't deserve it. I have to assume that they do deserve it. And that was a crucial turning point for me. I have to assume that when somebody else is successful, that they've done something to deserve it. Because two things. One, I find that it helps me to let go of some of the jealousy. But secondly, for me, it's crucial in working hard to become successful myself, right? Like if I feel like somebody else worked hard and did something that maybe I'm unaware of, they worked hard and did something that got them success, and I just don't necessarily know what that thing was, or I didn't observe it. It doesn't mean that they didn't work hard. It means that I can work hard too and get success. Because for me, the jealousy came from the idea that work didn't matter. That, if another person was successful and I thought it was something outside themselves, like they just had the right connections or it was some kind of luck, then it made me wonder about why I'm doing all this work if it's not work that makes you successful. That for me was the critical point, is keeping my perspective straight and recognizing that working hard and being active are the best ways to be successful. Now, I know I'm going to hear from some of you and say, oh, no, that's not the way it goes. I know so-and-so who doesn't work hard and he doesn't deserve his success. And yeah, okay, fine, sure. I mean, let's say that there's some people out there that just happen to be lucky and are successful for whatever reason, for something other than some positive internal qualities they possess. Fine. But so what? I mean, just because that's their formula for success doesn't mean that it's mine. And once I turned that corner, once I came to the conclusion that, look, the way I'm going to be personally successful is by accomplishing, by working hard, by taking opportunities when they come up, I started to do a lot more things, okay? So I went back to school. I got my second degree. Once I got my second degree, that opened a door for me where I can start to work in private practice. I've started to do that. By the way, if you're in Central New Jersey and you want to come to our private practice, check us out on the web, bewellnj.com. It's a wonderful practice in South Plainfield. If you need some treatment, come on over. We take most insurance. But so I started to do that. I also started to do this. This for me is a creative kind of a personal development type project, this podcasting. Do I think that I'm ever going to make any money off this podcast? No, of course not. But what I did was I got into the habit of setting goals for myself and accomplishing them. So I set a goal for myself that I wanted to try a podcast, and I promised myself I would do 100 episodes. I'm 12%. It's easy. The number is also the percentage when we talk about 100. But I'm 12% of the way through my goal, and I'm going to do 100. Some of them are going to be good, and some are going to suck. And But the idea is that I'm staying active. I have something to keep my mind occupied, to stay busy and stay sharp with. And maybe I'll tell you what, I'm having a podcast will maybe lead to success more than not having a podcast, right? Like maybe this thing will get popular and somebody will want to advertise on here and give me a few bucks for that. But the point being, I'm more likely to have success doing it than not doing it, right? If I was going to come home and sit around and fart around and play video games like I was before I came to this conclusion, my chances of success were nil, right? So maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I am barking up a tree, and it's better than not. So again, the idea that people have success and we're jealous of them comes from, again, I'm speaking for me largely here, but it comes from the idea that the people that are successful don't deserve it, and we do. And we don't have it. When we don't have success, it's not because we're not working hard, but it's because of some things outside us that are preventing us, something unfair, in other words. But if you can embrace the idea of the fundamental attribution error, what you realize is two things. One, if other person has success, our tendency is to attribute their success to things outside them, right? So our tendency is to say, well, they're successful because of their connections or luck or blah, 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 right? So we have to understand that we're making an error and that there are probably some qualities about that person that made them successful. Again, I'm sure there's exceptions, but I'm talking about in most cases when, not somebody who just hit the lotto, right? But somebody who has over time built something and gotten somewhere and are doing well for themselves. So we have to give them credit for their internal qualities. On the flip side, we have a tendency to look at ourselves and know that we work hard because we feel it, and know that we have good intentions, and know that we're smart and dedicated and right? And we tend to attribute our lack of success to things outside us. So, having a boss that doesn't like you, or just not knowing the right people, or whatever. Again, we have to take into account the fundamental attribution error, right? And also say that maybe there's something about us personally that's blocking us. Maybe we're not working as hard as we could be, right? Maybe we're not putting in the time. Maybe we're lazy. Maybe we're at least a little bit we're lazy, or we don't want to deal with being uncomfortable. So if you're the type of person that has one job after another because you can't deal with having a boss, maybe that's your shit. Right? Maybe it's not that you have a boss or you have a series of bosses that don't like you, but maybe you just are sucky at having a boss, and that's going to be the thing that keeps you from being successful. Maybe in order to be successful, you have to work on your stuff. Maybe you have to tighten up your game and figure out how to be a good employee. So again, it's a twofold benefit there. On one hand, we can let go of some of the jealousy of other people, but on the other hand, we can also take a good look at ourselves, honestly, and work on the things that we need to work on. Again, for me, incorporating this into my life has made me more active, has made me do some things that have made me a few more bucks and gotten me more involved in creative things. So, fundamental attribution error, guys, is big for me in counseling, and big for me in life in general. So, Bill Breen, thank you very much for sharing that with me. Great guy. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, my examination of my own jealousy, and hopefully you can apply some of it to yourself. Maybe, hey, I am willing to, again, fundamental attribution error, I'm willing to accept, maybe I'm just a terrible person. Maybe nobody has jealousy except me. And if that's true, then it's on me, but at least I've tried to work on it. But I suspect that a lot of people deal with these kinds of feelings. So, guys, I want you to follow me on Twitter, please. My Twitter handle is @breakdownswithg. Please email me your questions. I check my Gmail account regularly, at least once a day, and I need some show ideas. So you can email me at breakdownswithg@gmail.com. I also have the Tumblr page, breakdownswithg.tumblr.com. And if you guys need any mental health help, other than some serious stuff, you need to go see a counselor or whatever, you can check out the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website at samhsa.gov, or call your insurance company if you have insurance and get a referral through them. But generally, if you need help, go get it. Thanks for listening, guys. You can download this thing. Well, if you're listening to this thing, you already downloaded it, so never mind. But share it with a friend, comment, vote on this thing, upvote it, like it, whatever it is. And thanks for listening. See you next time.